There exists a quiet space, a single breath between thought and action, where your entire future pivots. In that sliver of time, a word, a glance, a reaction can either build a bridge to connection or burn it to ash. Most of us live our lives unaware of the power we surrender when we let emotion seize the reins. Anger, fear, frustration. They feel like our own, like we are in command, but in reality, they are commanding us. Today, we will speak of the habits that do not merely help you manage your emotions, but help you master them. This is not a path to becoming cold or detached. It is about becoming so centered, so profoundly grounded, that nothing outside of you can shake the core of you. Imagine a life lived with that kind of composure, where your words are deliberate, your actions are intentional, and your presence is an unshakable calm. That is the life we are building here. If you believe in becoming the eye of the storm, in forging yourself into someone who moves through chaos with clarity and purpose, then you have found your path. Join us on this journey, not merely as a spectator, but as a fellow traveler, with each step bringing you closer to the person you were always meant to become. 1. The 5-second reset. Sometimes, a single second is all it takes to alter the entire landscape of your mood, your relationships, or your day. One comment, one look, one unexpected turn of events, and suddenly, you are lost in a place you never intended to be. You know the feeling, the sudden heat in your chest, the clenching of your jaw, the frantic cascade of thoughts. It is your body's primal scream. React, now. A command that bypasses the mind entirely. This is the trap where most people are caught. We exist in that raw, unfiltered moment where emotion is driving, and reason is bound and gagged in the trunk. And if you have ever spoken words you could not retract, or made a choice you ache to undo, you know how costly those moments can be. The Stoics warned us of this peril centuries ago. This is where the 5-second reset finds its power. It sounds almost too simple. 5 seconds. How could that change anything of consequence? But those 5 seconds are the chasm between owning your emotions and your emotions owning you. When that wave of anger or anxiety hits, your brain is flooded with a chemical tide. Adrenaline, cortisol, the ancient hormones of survival, designed to propel you into action. In the wild, this saved our ancestors. But in the modern world, this same impulse is more likely to shatter relationships, derail careers, and destroy our own peace. Those 5 seconds are the sacred pause. They are your first step in making the unconscious conscious, in transforming a raw, automatic reaction into a deliberate, considered response. Here is how it works. The next time you feel that internal explosion building, in an argument, a tense meeting, or even when a driver cuts you off, simply stop. Physically, mentally, emotionally, stop. Close your eyes if you can. Take one deep, slow breath and begin to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In that pause, feel your body. Notice the tightness in your muscles begin to soften, your heart rate begin to slow, your mind clear just enough to glimpse the larger picture. This is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about creating just enough space for your wiser self to catch up with your emotional self. Think of it this way. You are driving, and a car swerves into your lane. Instinct screams at you to honk, to shout, to accelerate and make a point. But if you count to 5, you grant yourself a moment to consider. Perhaps that person is rushing to a hospital. Perhaps it was a careless mistake. Perhaps they simply did not see you. The point is not what they did. The point is that you do not know. And in those 5 seconds, you gain the clarity to decide if this one moment is worth carrying with you for the rest of your day. This is emotional self-defense. You aren't pretending it didn't happen. You are choosing not to let it poison your peace. The ancient Stoics called this prohairesis, the faculty of choice, the profound understanding that while you cannot control the chaos of the world, you can always, always control the space between what happens to you and what you do next. The 5-second reset is the modern expression of that ancient principle. It is training your mind to step back from the ledge, to resist the primal urge to leap into the fire of the moment. It will not be perfect at first. Sometimes you will forget. Other times you will only make it to 3 before the words spill out. But every time you succeed, you are rewiring your brain. You are teaching it to prioritize composure over chaos. That is what growth feels like. From a psychological view, those 5 seconds shift your brain's activity from the amygdala, the seat of raw emotion, to the prefrontal cortex, the home of reason and judgment. You are literally giving your brain time to switch from fight or flight to think it through. As Aristotle said, anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, and to the right degree, and at the right time, and for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power, and is not easy. The 5-second reset is how you begin to claim that power. 5 seconds will not solve your problems, but it will stop you from pouring gasoline on a fire that might have otherwise burned itself out. Think of the last time you regretted something you said. What if you had given yourself just 5 seconds? Would you have said the same thing in the same way? Almost certainly not. Those 5 seconds are a gift you give yourself and everyone around you. They are a declaration. I am in control here. My emotions do not dictate my actions. Imagine applying this everywhere. Your partner makes a sharp comment. 5 seconds. Your boss criticizes you publicly. 5 seconds. A stranger online leaves an insult. 5 seconds. Over time, you begin to see how many storms simply pass by on their own, without you ever needing to step into their fury. This is the quiet strength the Stoics admired, the ability to remain unmoved by the passing waves. As Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This habit is that philosophy in action, and this is where a simple trick becomes a way of life. It's not about counting anymore. It's about cultivating presence. The reset is a doorway into a deeper discipline of self-awareness and emotional resilience. Each time you practice it, you are telling yourself, I value my peace more than this argument. I value my integrity more than this fleeting surge of pride. And every time you make that choice, you become someone you respect a little more. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And who you truly are is not defined by your worst reactions in your worst moments. You are defined by the choices you make in the quiet space between what happens and what you do. The 5-second reset is your tool. Use it to protect that space. Honor it. Because one day, you will look back on a moment where you could have let your emotions burn everything down, and you will see that instead, you built something better, simply because you paused long enough to remember what truly mattered. 2. Dig into the why. There is a curious truth about our emotional storms. They are rarely about the weather of today. They feel immediate, yes. A comment, an action, a certain look from another person, and it's as if they've struck a match inside you. But if you dare to look closer, you'll find the kindling was already there, laid down years, perhaps even decades ago. The present moment merely tossed the flame. This is why stepping back is so profound. Most people never consider it. They believe their anger is only about the rude comment. Their sadness is only about the bad news. Their anxiety is only about tomorrow's schedule. But the mind is a place of deep layers. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius constantly urged himself to look beneath the surface, because the surface is where instinct lives, but wisdom lives in the depths. If you are willing to excavate, to dig beneath the surface of the words that were spoken, of the event that just occurred, you will almost always find an older story being replayed. Perhaps a teacher once shamed you before the class, and now a colleague's sarcastic remark stirs that same ghost of humiliation. Perhaps you felt invisible as a child, and now being overlooked in a meeting cuts deeper than the situation warrants. You think you are reacting to the moment, but a part of you is reacting as if your very survival is at stake. When you begin to ask yourself, why this? Why now? Why so strong? You create space for something the Stoics valued above all else: perspective. As Epictetus taught, men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them. If your view is clouded by old pain, you are not truly seeing the present moment for what it is. The other person becomes a stand-in for a figure from your past, and you grant them an emotional power they do not deserve. By digging into the why, you reclaim that power. You realize that while you cannot control the first wave of emotion that washes over you, you can control what you do next. And that is everything. Let us be honest. This excavation is not always comfortable. At times, it is deeply painful. It means admitting that a part of you is still wounded. It means confronting insecurities you have long pretended do not exist. It means looking at the messy, complicated truth of who you are, not just the polished version you present to the world. But avoiding the truth does not make it vanish. It merely keeps it in the driver's seat, where it will continue to steer you into the same conflicts, the same arguments, the same cycles of regret. Jung called these unexamined parts of ourselves the shadow, and he believed they hold enormous power over us until we have the courage to face them. By digging into the why, you are shining a light into that shadow, and light changes everything. Think of a time you overreacted to something small. Someone was late, and you felt a disproportionate rage. On the surface, it was about their lateness, but perhaps, deep down, it was about feeling disrespected, unimportant, forgotten. Feelings with roots that stretch far back into your own history, having nothing to do with this person. As you trace the emotional thread back through time, patterns begin to emerge. You see that certain words, certain situations, certain people always seem to strike the same raw nerve. And with that recognition comes a profound shift. You stop seeing the world as an antagonist and realize, this is mine. This is my work to do. That realization alone is liberating. You are no longer a passenger. You are the navigator, steering toward wiser choices. The Stoics practiced an exercise called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. They would imagine future hardships, considering not just what might happen, but how they might feel, why they might feel that way, and how they would choose to respond. This wasn't pessimism, it was preparation. They understood that if you wait until you are in the heart of the storm to discover your triggers, it is already too late. By anticipating, by asking, why? Before the crisis arrives, you build the emotional muscle to hold you steady when life grows loud. This is where ancient wisdom and modern psychology converge. Therapists use techniques to help people separate a trigger from the true source of their pain. It is the same principle. If you can find the root of the weed, you can stop it from growing back again and again. This is not about blaming yourself. It is about owning your reactions so that you may transform them. The next time you feel triggered, before you lash out or shut down, pause. Ask yourself, what does this remind me of? Where have I felt this before? Am I reacting to this moment, or am I reliving my past? The answers may not come at once. That is fine. The act of asking is what matters. It turns the emotion from a command into a clue. Imagine your friend makes a joke that stings. The old you might have snapped back or withdrawn into a resentful silence. But this time you catch it. You ask yourself, why did that land so hard? And you realize it touched a vulnerability you have carried since childhood. Suddenly the anger softens into understanding. You can then choose to explain to your friend why it hurt, or you can choose to let it go because you see it for what it truly is, not an attack, but a trigger. That choice is where your freedom lies. The deeper you go with this practice, the more you will discover an unexpected side effect: compassion. When you understand that your own reactions often spring from old wounds, you begin to see that other people's reactions do too. This does not excuse poor behavior, but it allows you to approach it with a greater perspective, which in turn gives you more options for how to respond. And this is the beauty of it. The more you practice asking why, the less often you get caught in the same emotional traps. You see the patterns before they play out, and slowly, the things that used to ignite you begin to lose their power. You are no longer a bundle of kindling waiting for a spark. You are the one holding the water, fully aware of where the fire might start, and ready to keep it from spreading. As Marcus Aurelius said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Digging into the why is how you revoke that power. It is how you stop reacting blindly and start responding with a clarity that can change not just your day, but your life. 3. Do not let resentment brew. We tell ourselves a comforting lie, that time heals all wounds. But often, time does not heal. It buries. It allows a fine layer of dust to settle over an injury, while underneath, the infection quietly spreads. We say, "I'll get over it," or "It's not worth bringing up." But unresolved tension does not dissolve into the ether. It ferments. What begins as a minor slight, a small irritation, becomes a low, discordant hum in the background of your life, subtly poisoning your thoughts, your words, your choices. Resentment is an emotional mold. It grows in the dark, silent places we refuse to inspect. By the time we notice its musty scent, it has already begun to corrupt everything it touches. The Stoics would have understood this well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." But here is the paradox. If you are carrying resentment, you are not unlike your offender. You are still chained to them, still allowing their actions to dictate your inner state. Holding on to resentment is a form of exhaustion, not just emotionally, but physically. Modern psychology shows that suppressed bitterness increases stress hormones, weakens the immune system, and disrupts sleep. You may think you are ignoring the wound, but your body is keeping score. As Carl Jung wrote, "What you resist persists." If you resist acknowledging the resentment, it doesn't vanish. It simply burrows deeper, shaping your inner world in ways you cannot see. This is why the Stoics valued clarity and truth above all. They knew that facing reality, no matter how uncomfortable, is the only path to freedom. Pretending you are fine is not the same as being fine. The insidious danger of brewing resentment is how it changes you. You become a little colder, more guarded, more cynical, without ever making a conscious decision to be so. You start avoiding certain people or conversations, not because the present moment is a threat, but because the ghost of the past is whispering in your ear. Epictetus warned, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." This isn't about self-blame. It is about recognizing that as long as you harbor resentment, you are an active participant in your own suffering. you are allowing the injury to keep its grip on your life. The antidote is not denial. It is confrontation. Not the aggressive, finger-pointing kind, but the courageous, clear, and calm kind. It is the willingness to say, "This happened, this hurt, and we need to address it." It is about cleaning the wound before it becomes infected. And yes, it requires vulnerability. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is the only doorway to true resolution. Aristotle believed virtue was found in the balance between extremes. Here, the extremes are explosive rage and silent bitterness. The virtuous path, the path of courage, is to have the conversation. Think of how this plays out. A friend repeatedly cancels on you. You say nothing, telling yourself it's not worth the drama. But with each cancellation, a small layer of resentment is added. You answer their texts more slowly. Your tone becomes clipped. Then one day they do something trivial, and you react with a force that surprises even you. They are bewildered, because they cannot see the months of silent frustration that have been building in the shadows. This is what happens when we let resentment fester. It turns molehills into mountains that eventually become impossible to climb. From a Stoic view, addressing resentment early is an act of maintaining your inner peace. The original injury may have been a single moment in time, but resentment forces you to relive it over and over again. Each time you replay it in your mind, it leaves another scar. And here is the great irony. While you are carrying this immense weight, the person you resent may be living their life entirely unaware. You are lugging around an invisible burden that only you can feel. For in the end, holding on to resentment is like grasping a burning coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. It is, as the saying goes, like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It simply does not work that way. Confronting resentment, you see, isn't always a matter of facing another person. Sometimes, the most crucial conversation is the one you have with yourself. Perhaps the person is no longer in your life, or maybe speaking with them is neither safe nor healthy. In that case, the work becomes internal. You write. You speak the words you wish you could say aloud. You allow the anger to rise, not as a destructive indulgence, but as a current of energy to be processed and moved through you. The Stoics practiced what they called the view from above, imagining life from a wider cosmic perspective. When you zoom out far enough, you see that most grudges shrink into insignificance against the vast tapestry of your life. That perspective doesn't erase the hurt, but it does make it easier to loosen your grip. Carl Jung believed that what we leave unexamined in ourselves is often projected onto others. If you've ever found yourself suddenly irritated by someone for no apparent reason, it might be because they mirror a part of yourself you have yet to accept. Resentment, then, can be less about the other person's flaw and more about your own unacknowledged pain. By doing the work, reflecting, writing, asking difficult questions, you begin to separate the real wound from the imagined one. That clarity is liberating. It is also worth remembering that resentment thrives in silence. Left unspoken, it grows wild. This is why clear communication is more than a relationship skill. It is a form of emotional hygiene. You wouldn't leave your home uncleaned for months and expect it to be a pleasant place to live. Why treat your inner life any differently? When something bothers you, speak up, not with hostility, but with honesty. When you said that, I felt hurt. When this happened, I felt overlooked. These statements are simple but powerful. You are not accusing, you are revealing. And in that revelation, you create a space where resolution becomes possible. The Stoics understood that emotional control is not emotional avoidance. In his journals, Marcus Aurelius admitted to dealing with difficult people daily, but he also reminded himself that they were part of the same human family, subject to the same flaws he carried himself. This mindset doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. It means recognizing the shared humanity in those who hurt us. When you see that, resentment loses some of its sharpness. Picture yourself carrying a heavy bag of rocks. Each stone is a grudge, a slight, an unresolved tension. Some you picked up years ago, others just last week. At first, you tell yourself you're strong enough, but over time the bag gets heavier. You start to move slower. Life feels harder, not because the world has changed, but because you are so weighed down. Now, imagine setting that bag down. Feel the relief, the lightness, the freedom to move again. That is what letting go of resentment feels like. Seneca said, "He who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than is necessary." Resentment makes you suffer before, during, and long after the original event. Letting it go doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It means you refuse to keep suffering for it. You choose your own peace over the hollow satisfaction of holding on. And that choice, repeated over time, changes you. You become lighter, quicker to forgive, not because you are naive, but because you are wise enough to know that bitterness costs more than it is worth. In the end, resentment is a debt you pay for someone else's actions. The Stoics, Jung, Aristotle, they all urged us in their own ways to stop paying that debt. Face the tension, have the conversation, do the inner work. Do it not for them, but for you. Because the moment you stop letting resentment brew is the moment you start reclaiming your energy, your clarity, and your life. And that, more than any grudge, is worth holding on to. 4. Name it to tame it. There are moments when your inner world feels like a tangled knot of wires, confused, messy, impossible to separate. You know you're feeling something, but it's so jumbled you can't put a name to it. One minute you're irritated, the next you're sad. Then suddenly you snap at someone for no clear reason. This is the danger of unnamed emotions. They roam free, causing chaos wherever they go. The truth is, when you don't take the time to identify what you are feeling, your emotions run the show, silently pulling the strings while you believe you're in control. The Stoics held a practical view of emotions. They didn't deny their existence. They simply believed that to live a good life, you must understand them, question them, and put them in their proper place. When you can label what is happening inside you, it's like turning on a light in a dark room. The monsters look smaller, the shadows lose their menace, and you can finally see where to step next. This is the essence of name it to tame it. You cannot fix what you cannot define. Imagine going to a doctor and saying only, "I feel bad." It's not enough information. They need specifics to know if you've pulled a muscle, caught a virus, or broken a bone. The same is true for your emotional health. If you simply say, "I'm upset," you're dealing with a vague cloud that could be anger, disappointment, fear, or guilt. But when you pause and ask yourself, "What exactly am I feeling?" you begin to peel away the layers of confusion. Suddenly, you're no longer fighting a faceless enemy. You're dealing with something you can understand and respond to. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Neuroscientists have found that simply labeling an emotion, literally putting it into words, can reduce its intensity. This process is called affect labeling. It works because the act of naming a feeling activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning. In other words, you shift the experience from the purely emotional part of your brain to the rational part. This is how you stop spiraling and start thinking clearly again. Epictetus would have appreciated this science. He taught that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. Naming your emotion is the first step toward changing that interpretation. Consider a real-world example. Imagine you're working on a project, and a colleague makes a comment that stings. you immediately feel your face grow hot. Your chest tightens. You want to fire back with something sharp. If you don't pause, you might just call this feeling anger. But what if it's not truly anger? Perhaps you're embarrassed because you felt criticized in front of others. Or perhaps you're anxious because their comment made you doubt your abilities. Those are very different emotions, and they require different responses. Anger might push you to defend yourself, embarrassment to avoid the situation, and anxiety to seek reassurance. You will only choose the right path if you know which feeling you're actually dealing with. The Stoics would say that emotions are signals. They are there to inform you, not to control you. When you cannot name what you are feeling, you suffer twice. First from the emotion itself, and second from the confusion of not knowing what to do with it. This is why the act of naming is so powerful. It's not about pretending the feeling isn't there. It's about understanding precisely what it is, so you can address it properly. And, let's be honest, sometimes what we call anger is actually hurt. Sometimes frustration is just unspoken fear. And sometimes sadness is really exhaustion in disguise. By naming your emotions, you strip away the false labels and replace them with truth. This doesn't make the feeling magically disappear, but it changes your relationship with it. You move from being inside the storm to standing outside, watching it pass, knowing it will move on. There is a level of self-respect in this practice. Taking the time to understand what you're feeling is a way of saying, my inner world matters. I am worth understanding. It is easy to dismiss our emotions as overreactions or push them aside because they feel inconvenient. But the Stoics never said to ignore yourself. They said to know yourself. As Aristotle wrote, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Naming your emotions is one of the simplest yet most profound ways to begin. Think about how this plays out in your relationships. If you enter a conversation saying, I'm mad at you, the other person will likely become defensive. But if you can say, I felt hurt when you said that, or I felt left out when that decision was made, you shift the dynamic entirely. Now, it's not about accusation. It's about clarity. And clarity is where understanding begins. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You cannot become who you are if you are lost in a fog of unnamed emotions. It's also important to note that naming your emotions doesn't mean indulging them. The Stoics didn't believe in wallowing, and neither should you. Once you have named the feeling, the next step is to decide what to do with it. That is where your philosophy, your values, and your self-discipline come into play. The feeling might be valid, but that doesn't mean every reaction is. As Epictetus advised, no man is free who is not master of himself. And mastery begins with awareness. You cannot master what you refuse to look at. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. You will catch yourself mid-reaction and think, wait, what am I actually feeling right now? You will become better at noticing the difference between irritation and disappointment, between fear and excitement. And that awareness will make you calmer, more thoughtful, and more in control. It's not about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally intelligent. And the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more resilient you become. Naming your emotions is like mapping uncharted territory. At first it feels awkward. You aren't sure which paths to take or how to describe the landscape. But the more you practice, the clearer the map becomes. Eventually, when an emotion rises, you'll know exactly where you are and how to navigate through it. Emotions, after all, are not the enemy. They are part of being human. Think of them as visitors knocking at your door. If you ignore them, they might pound harder. If you let them in without asking who they are, they might make a mess. But if you open the door, greet them by name, and decide how long they can stay, you remain the host. That is the essence of the Stoic approach: to acknowledge reality, understand it, and respond in a way that aligns with your highest self. The next time you feel that storm brewing inside, don't rush to silence it or let it take over. Stop. Breathe. Ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? Name it. Own it. And in that moment, you will discover what the Stoics knew all along. Naming your emotions is the first step to taming them, and taming them is the first step to true strength. 5. Keep stress in check. There is a reason the same small annoyance can roll off your back one day and completely unravel you the next. It isn't always about the event itself, it's about the state you're in when it happens. If your mind is calm and your energy is balanced, you can navigate challenges with clarity. But when you are worn down, running on empty, and carrying a pile of invisible pressures, even the tiniest inconvenience can feel like a personal attack. This is what stress does. It magnifies every emotion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." And our judgment is never more clouded than when we are stressed. Stress does not just live in your body, it lives in your perception, quietly distorting the way you see the world. Think of a day when you woke up after a good night's sleep, enjoyed a slow morning, and perhaps got some exercise. On a day like that, you can handle traffic or a delay without much fuss. Now, think of a day when you're running late, have skipped breakfast, and your phone is buzzing nonstop. That same traffic feels like a personal insult. The delay feels catastrophic. The difference is not in the events, it is in you. As Carl Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. If you don't notice the stress building within you, you will mistake every external challenge for the real problem, when in truth, the storm began inside. Stress is sneaky. It rarely announces itself. It builds slowly, weaving itself into your daily life until you can no longer tell where normal ends and overworked begins. And because we have normalized it, wearing busyness like a badge of honor, we don't realize we are walking around in a constant state of low-level fight or flight. The Stoics, despite living in a far less hectic time, understood the need for regular mental maintenance. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Stress feeds that imagination. It convinces you that everything is urgent, that every challenge is larger than it is, and that you have no room to breathe. Without actively managing it, stress will rule your reactions before you even have a chance to think. The key to emotional control, then, is not just about what you do in the heat of the moment. It is about what you do long before that moment arrives. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, imagining challenges in advance so they would not be caught off guard. You can take a similar approach with stress. Manage it daily, so when life throws something unexpected your way, you are not already at your breaking point. This means building habits that create a buffer between you and the chaos. Exercise to move tension out of your body. Meditate to clear mental clutter. Write down your thoughts so they don't swirl endlessly in your head. Take short breaks before you need them, not after you've hit a wall. These are not luxuries. They are maintenance for the most important tool you have, your mind. From a psychological standpoint, stress management is about keeping your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, online. When you're stressed, your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, pulling you into survival mode. That's useful if you're running from danger, but terrible if you're trying to have a calm conversation or make a wise decision. Aristotle believed that virtue lies in balance. Stress, in excess, distorts that balance. It tips you into extremes, overreacting to minor issues, withdrawing from challenges, or clinging to control. One of the most important things you can do is learn to recognize your personal stress signals. For some, they are physical: tight shoulders, a clenched jaw. For others, they are mental: trouble focusing, constant irritation. The Stoics taught self-awareness as a daily discipline. As Epictetus said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Knowing who you want to be means noticing when you're drifting away from it, and stress is often the first sign. Here is where many people go wrong. They wait for the weekend, the vacation, or a crisis to finally rest. But stress does not care about your schedule. It must be addressed in small, consistent ways, every day. That could mean starting your morning with 10 minutes of silence instead of scrolling on your phone. It could mean taking a walk between meetings. It could mean saying no to commitments that will stretch you too thin. There is also a deep connection between stress and the stories we tell ourselves. Under stress, we default to worst-case thinking. A late email becomes a sign we've upset someone. A delay becomes a conspiracy of bad luck. The antidote is to slow down enough to challenge those stories. Is this truly a disaster or just an inconvenience? The less stress you carry, the easier it is to make those distinctions. Stress magnifies irritations, making them feel personal and urgent. But if you keep it in check, you create a mental gap between a trigger and your reaction, a space where you can choose your response. That space is where emotional control lives. The Stoics didn't have smartphones or 24-hour news cycles, but they understood the principle that still applies today. Guard your inner peace as fiercely as you guard your possessions. In modern life, that means scheduling time for restoration as deliberately as you schedule work. It means treating rest as a responsibility, not a reward you have to earn. It means having the humility to know when you are stretched too thin, and the discipline to pull back before something snaps. When you make stress management a non-negotiable part of your life, you are not just preventing breakdowns. You are building resilience. You are training your mind to recover faster, to think clearer, and to act with the steadiness the Stoics admired. Unchecked stress is like an unchecked fire. It consumes everything in its path. Your job is to keep it contained, to tend to it regularly, and to never let it grow so large that it blinds you to what matters. In the words of Epictetus, "It is not things themselves that trouble us, but our opinions about them." Keeping stress in check means keeping your opinions grounded, your mind clear, and your actions aligned with who you want to be. When you stand on that solid ground, the world can shake, and you will still be steady. And that steadiness, that inner fortress, is what gives you the freedom to live well, choose wisely, and meet life's storms with the calm that the Stoics considered the highest form of strength. 6. Make room for your feelings. For there is a strange paradox to our emotions. When we ignore them, they do not simply fade into silence. They linger, they build, they wait, and eventually they find a way out, often in ways we do not expect and at times we do not want. This is the nature of bottling our feelings. We are not discarding them. We are merely storing them in the deep, quiet corners of ourselves, letting the pressure mount until the vessel can no longer hold. When we fail to make room for our emotions, they begin to run our lives from behind the scenes, subtly influencing our words, our reactions, and even our health, all without our conscious consent. Many of us, especially men, were taught in childhood to see emotion as a weakness. Be strong, man up, don't cry. The message was clear. Feelings were something to be suppressed, not expressed. But the Stoics, so often misunderstood as cold and unfeeling, never preached suppression. They preached understanding. They knew emotions were an inseparable part of human nature, but they also believed in the profound importance of not being ruled by them. When we lock our emotions away, they rarely stay put. They emerge sideways. A small annoyance erupts into an overreaction. A minor disagreement spirals into a full-blown argument. Sometimes the emotion doesn't even surface where it belongs. You might feel anger, but instead of addressing its source, you unleash it upon the wrong person. This is the danger of not making room for your feelings. They do not remain neatly in the containers we build for them. They leak. They seep into our thoughts, our behaviors, our decisions. Seneca wrote, "It is more civilized to make fun of life than to bewail it." Yet, humor alone is not enough to process what we feel. If all we do is mask our emotions with distractions, they remain inside us, silently shaping our inner world. Making room for your emotions does not mean letting them dictate your every move. It means giving them a safe, controlled space to exist, so they do not burst forth uncontrollably. Think of it as a pressure valve. By releasing a little at a time, you prevent an explosion. This is why finding healthy outlets is so essential. Journaling is one of the most effective. When you translate your feelings into words, you give them structure. What was once a formless fog in your mind becomes something you can look at, examine, and understand. Modern psychology confirms that expressive writing can reduce stress, improve mood, and even strengthen the immune system. The Stoics, in their own way, practiced this form of reflection daily. Talking to someone you trust is another powerful way to make space. It need not be a formal therapy session, though therapy is invaluable for many. It can be as simple as sitting with a friend who listens without judgment. Sharing your feelings aloud has a grounding effect. You hear your own voice, receive feedback, and often find clarity simply by articulating what has been swirling in your mind. Epictetus reminded his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But that wisdom also works in reverse. Sometimes we must speak to hear ourselves more clearly. For those not yet ready to speak openly, even recording a voice note to yourself can help. It may feel awkward at first, but hearing your own voice express what you are going through makes the emotion feel less abstract. It is no longer an invisible weight in your chest. It is something you can identify, acknowledge, and begin to work with. As Carl Jung noted, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." When you give your feelings a voice, you are choosing not to be defined by what you've held inside. You are choosing to work through it. The danger of suppressed emotions lies not only in the sudden blow-ups, but also in the slow, silent erosion of your mental and physical health. Chronic stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical ailments like headaches and digestive issues can stem from what goes unprocessed. The mind and body are not separate entities. When you push your emotions down, your body is forced to carry their weight. The Stoics may not have had modern medical research, but they understood this connection between inner turmoil and physical well-being. They sought calm not only as a virtue, but as a necessity for a healthy life. Making room for your feelings is also about breaking inherited cycles. Many of us learned how to handle, or not handle, our emotions from our parents, guardians, or culture. If you grew up in a home where feelings were met with dismissal or punishment, it is only natural to believe that hiding them is safer. But what kept you safe in one chapter of your life can cause you harm in the next. And here lies the paradox. The more space you give your emotions, the less control they have over you. When you allow yourself to feel sadness without judgment, it passes more quickly. When you acknowledge your anger, you can address its cause without lashing out. When you admit to fear, you can prepare for what lies ahead instead of pretending you are invincible. The Stoics valued preparation. They believed in facing reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. Pretending you are unaffected does not make you stronger. It makes you unprepared. There is also a deep self-respect in this practice. It is a way of saying, "I matter enough to understand what is happening inside of me." So many people run from themselves, filling every quiet moment with noise and distraction to avoid facing what's truly going on. But avoidance only deepens the shadow. This does not mean wallowing. The Stoics would warn against letting emotions dominate your every thought. Their goal was balance, to recognize feelings without being enslaved by them. This can be as simple as building small, consistent habits into your life. 10 minutes of writing in the morning, a quiet walk to let your thoughts settle, a regular check-in with a friend. These habits create a healthy flow where feelings can move through you instead of getting stuck. It is also about learning to tolerate discomfort. We often avoid our feelings because they are uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the same as danger. The Stoics embraced discomfort as a way to fortify the mind. As Seneca said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. When you sit with a difficult feeling instead of fleeing from it, you build the resilience to handle it better next time. In relationships, this practice changes everything. Instead of shutting down or exploding, you can express what you feel in a way that invites connection, not conflict. I felt hurt when this happened. I've been feeling overwhelmed lately. These statements open doors, while silence and defensiveness close them. Emotional openness is contagious. It encourages honesty and trust. And here is the truth. Emotions are not interruptions to life. They are life. They are signals, teachers, and mirrors reflecting what matters to us. The Stoics aimed for a life of virtue, a life lived in alignment with one's highest values. You cannot live in alignment if you ignore the very feelings that tell you when you're drifting off course. So, make room for them. Journal, speak, reflect, listen. Create space inside yourself so emotions can breathe, move, and eventually leave when their work is done. The more room you give them, the more room you will have for peace, clarity, and the kind of strength the Stoics truly admired. A strength that comes not from denying your humanity, but from embracing it fully, with eyes open and heart steady. But there is another way to release this pressure, a path that transforms emotion into action. You must learn to channel your energy. While conversation can be powerful, it is not the only outlet we have, and sometimes it is not the most effective. There are moments when your mind feels like a shaken bottle, and talking about it might only spray the mess everywhere. Instead of letting the pressure explode, you can channel it. Take all that raw energy, all that tension building inside, and give it somewhere meaningful to go. Emotions are energy in motion. This is not just a poetic phrase. It is a literal truth. You feel it physically. The tightness in your chest when anxious, the restlessness in your legs when frustrated, the heat rising in your face when angry. Your body is telling you to do something. The problem is, most of us do the wrong thing. We yell, we lash out, we slam doors. The Stoics would call this a failure of self-mastery. Channeling your energy means finding a physical or creative outlet that pulls you out of your head and into the present moment. For some, it is sports, pushing the body until the muscles burn and the mind quiets. For others, it is music, picking up an instrument, singing until the throat is raw, or losing oneself in a song that seems to understand better than words ever could. And for some, it is art, painting until the colors on the canvas resemble the storm in your mind. As Carl Jung said, the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. That inner necessity is often your emotions, begging for release. Channeling emotion into action changes the story you tell yourself. If you are angry and punch a wall, you reinforce the story that anger is destructive. But if you are angry and go for a hard run, you learn that anger can also be productive. It can push you farther, faster. The Stoics believed that every obstacle could be an advantage. Your emotions, when channeled, become tools for growth instead of weapons against yourself. This is not about avoiding the feeling. It is about letting it move through you in a way that causes no harm. Think of a river. If it is blocked, the water builds and floods everything. But if you give it a channel, it flows smoothly, giving life to its path. Your energy works the same way. Without a channel, it either stagnates or explodes. With one, it becomes creative, constructive, and often surprisingly beautiful. From a psychological perspective, this is called sublimation, transforming intense impulses into socially acceptable, even admirable behaviors. The Stoics lived this. They believed in discipline, in turning raw impulse into refined action. That is why Marcus Aurelius didn't just fight battles. He wrote meditations. It is why Seneca didn't just speak philosophy. He crafted letters that still inspire 2,000 years later. They were channeling their thoughts, fears, and frustrations into something lasting. You might think, but I am not an artist or an athlete. It doesn't matter. Channeling your energy is about the process, not the performance. The value is in the doing, not the result. If cooking calms you, then cook as if the meal is the only thing that matters. If gardening grounds you, then dig into the soil until your hands remember what it feels like to create life. By channeling emotion into action, you train yourself to respond with intention instead of reaction. You build the muscle of self-mastery, and over time, something powerful happens. The activities you use to process your emotions become part of your identity. You stop thinking, I need to run because I'm stressed, and start thinking, I'm a runner. The action becomes part of who you are. Jung observed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Channeling your emotions is a way of making that darkness conscious, taking something raw and difficult and turning it into something tangible. Of course, not all channels are healthy. Some people turn to drinking, reckless spending, or other self-destructive habits. These feel like release valves, but they are traps, keeping you in a cycle of pain. The Stoics would remind you that virtue is the goal. Choose channels that bring you closer to the person you want to be. Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The channels you choose become habits, so choose ones that build you up. The beauty of this practice is that it teaches you to meet yourself where you are. If you are restless, move. If you are heavy with emotion, create. If your mind is noisy, focus on something tangible and demanding. Over time, you learn that the very moments you least feel like doing these things are often when you need them most. The Stoics trained in the middle of the storm, and that is what channeling your energy is. Training in the storm, so you are stronger when the next one comes. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, where can I put this? Find your channel. Use the energy not as something to fear, but as fuel. That is what emotional mastery looks like, not the absence of feeling, but the ability to take whatever comes and turn it into something that serves you. The Stoics aimed not to be emotionless, but to be unshakable. And when you learn to channel your energy, you discover that even the heaviest emotions can become part of the foundation you stand upon, not the weight that crushes you. There is another vital practice. We must learn to see through another's eyes. It is astonishing how quickly we can cast someone as the villain in our own story. One comment, one action, one misunderstanding, and suddenly, they are the problem. We frame the moment in a way that makes us right and them wrong. In that mindset, empathy feels impossible. When emotions are running hot, the last thing we want to do is pause and consider their side. But the very thing we resist is often the one thing that can diffuse the tension and open a door to resolution. Marcus Aurelius, who spent his life surrounded by politics, betrayal, and war, reminded himself daily, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question. What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize?" That is perspective, and perspective changes everything. When we are angry or hurt, our mind narrows into tunnel vision. We focus only on what they did to us and how it made us feel. This is natural. Psychologists call it the self-serving bias, the tendency to view our own actions through a generous lens and others through a critical one. This bias is not a personal flaw, it is part of being human. And the Stoics understood this long before modern psychology. Epictetus taught that our emotional reactions to others often reveal more about our own state of mind than about theirs. Flipping to their perspective does not mean excusing bad behavior. It is about seeing the fuller picture, so our response is guided by clarity rather than pure emotion. By considering their side, we create enough distance from our own reaction to respond with wisdom. Think of a time you argued with someone, only to later learn information that completely changed your understanding. Perhaps the friend who snapped at you had just received terrible news. Perhaps the coworker who seemed cold was dealing with a family crisis. In that moment of realization, the anger softens. That is the power of perspective. It shifts your emotional state before the situation even changes. As Seneca wrote, "We are often more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." When you stay locked in your own viewpoint, you are often suffering from your imagination of their motives. The real test is to practice this in the moment. When the tension is fresh, ask yourself, what is their side of the story? They might be under a pressure you cannot see. They might have misunderstood you entirely. They might be reacting from their own fears and insecurities. You do not have to agree with their reasoning, but simply understanding it can rob the situation of its emotional heat. It transforms your role from adversary to investigator. You are no longer there to defend yourself. You are there to understand what is truly happening. The Stoics treated this as a discipline, a tool for self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius did not just endure difficult people. He actively sought to understand them. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the nature of the good and the bad, and I recognize that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own." This is not resignation. It is preparation. He knew that understanding human nature made him less vulnerable to offense. In the flow of daily life, the simple act of seeing the world from another's viewpoint can stop a misunderstanding from becoming an avalanche. Imagine a friend cancels your plans at the last minute. Your first instinct might be to think, they don't value my time. But what if you were to pause? What if you considered that they might be overwhelmed, unwell, or simply drained of emotional energy? That single pause can be the difference between a sharp, accusatory message and one that gently offers, "No worries, take care of yourself." One response escalates conflict, the other builds trust. From a psychological standpoint, this shift in perspective is profound. It quiets the primal alarm bells of the amygdala, the source of our fight-or-flight reactions, and awakens the parts of our mind dedicated to empathy and problem-solving. By consciously imagining another's experience, you lower your own physiological stress. Put simply, empathy calms you down. And in that state of calm, you are infinitely more capable of making a wise decision. Of course, there will be times when you step into their perspective and still conclude they were wrong, perhaps even intentionally hurtful. That is perfectly acceptable. Empathy does not require you to excuse harm or invite it into your life again. It simply allows you to address the situation without poisoning yourself in the process. As the Stoics taught, Your inner peace is a treasure too precious to surrender to anyone, no matter how justified your anger may feel. When you understand someone's motives, you can set boundaries from a place of clarity, not chaos. It's also worth remembering that empathy is a two-way street. When you practice it consistently, you cultivate an environment where others are more likely to offer you the same grace. Relationships founded on mutual understanding are resilient. They can weather conflicts without shattering at the first sign of disagreement. As Carl Jung observed, your perception will become clear only when you can look into your own soul. The more you understand your own flaws, struggles, and blind spots, the more generously you can interpret those of others. When this becomes a habit, a subtle but powerful transformation occurs. You begin to see people not as caricatures, but as complex beings. The rude cashier becomes someone exhausted from a double shift. The arrogant coworker might be masking a deep insecurity. The distant friend could be quietly fighting a battle with depression. Again, this doesn't mean you must agree with their actions or ignore poor behavior. But seeing their humanity fundamentally changes how you carry the weight of the interaction. The Stoics prized this ability, for it allowed them to manage their emotions without becoming cold or indifferent. One of the most effective ways to cultivate this skill is to practice it in low-stakes situations. When you read the news, watch a film, or hear a story about someone's life, pause and ask yourself, if I were them, with their unique history and experiences, could I have acted differently? This mental exercise trains your mind to stretch beyond its default point of view, so that when a real conflict arises, seeing another's perspective is already second nature. But the deepest truth is this: seeing from their perspective isn't really about them. It's about you. It's a refusal to let your vision narrow until all you can see is your own outrage. It's about keeping your mind open enough to find solutions where others see only adversaries. It is the living embodiment of the Stoic ideal, controlling what you can, your thoughts, your interpretations, your responses, and letting go of the rest. Because at the end of the day, you cannot control whether they understand you, but you can always choose to understand them. And in that choice, you will often find the sting of conflict fading, the defensive walls lowering, and the path to resolution beginning to clear. The Stoics would call that wisdom. Jung might call it integration. You can simply call it peace. 9. Own your emotions. There is a quiet dishonesty that many of us practice every day. It's not about lying to others. It's about lying to ourselves about how we truly feel. You know the script. Someone asks, "Are you okay?" And without a moment's hesitation, you reply, "I'm fine." The words are automatic, even if your chest is heavy, your mind is in turmoil, or your stomach is tied in knots. It's easier that way. Easier than explaining, easier than feeling exposed, easier than risking judgment. But here is the truth. When you bury your emotions under layers of "I'm fine," you don't eliminate them. You merely push them into the shadows, where they gain more control over you than ever before. The Stoics understood this with profound clarity. Many mistake Stoicism for an absence of emotion, imagining that figures like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca were immune to the storms of life. This is a misunderstanding. Stoicism is not about being emotionless. It's about being honest with yourself about what you feel, and then choosing, with discipline, how to respond. You cannot examine a flawed judgment or change your perspective if you are pretending there is no pain to begin with. Owning your emotions is the first step toward mastering them. Our culture dangerously mislabels difficult emotions as weaknesses. We are taught to see sadness as fragility, anger as a loss of control, and fear as cowardice. For men, this conditioning is often even more intense. Be strong, hold it in, never let them see you break. But what really happens when you bottle everything up? You begin carrying a backpack filled with invisible bricks. On the outside, you may appear composed, but on the inside, you are being crushed by the weight. And the longer you refuse to unpack it, the heavier it becomes. Owning your emotions is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see where everything is. You can navigate the space without stumbling. You may not like everything you see, but at least now you can do something about it. When you don't own your emotions, your imagination runs wild, weaving stories about what's happening inside you that are often far more terrifying than the truth. But when you acknowledge the feeling, yes, I am angry. Yes, I am anxious. Yes, I feel hurt. You strip away the mystery. The emotion is no longer a vague, looming cloud. It's a concrete thing you can finally work with. From a psychological perspective, denial doesn't make emotions disappear. It makes them stronger. Suppressed feelings tend to resurface in other forms. Chronic irritability, fatigue, an inability to focus, even physical symptoms like headaches or stomach pain. Your body will always attempt to process what your mind avoids. As Jung warned, what you resist persists. By fighting your emotions, you aren't keeping them out. You are trapping them in, where they have all the time and space they need to fester. However, owning your emotions is not about overindulging them. It's not about letting them seize the steering wheel and dictate your every move. The Stoics would never encourage wallowing in self-pity. Instead, it is about meeting your emotions as you would a visitor at your door. You acknowledge their presence. You listen to what they have to say. And then, you decide how long they get to stay. You don't have to hand over the keys to your house, but you also don't slam the door in their face and pretend no one is there. Think about the last time you felt truly angry. Did you admit it to yourself immediately? Or did you try to reframe it as, I'm just tired, or it's not a big deal? What happened next? The feeling likely didn't vanish. It probably leaked out in sarcastic comments, passive-aggressive actions, or a restless mind that robbed you of sleep. Now, imagine that same moment, but instead, you simply say to yourself, I am angry. Just those 3 words. It is astonishing how much relief can come from calling a thing by its true name. There is a deeper layer to this as well. When you own your emotions, you give yourself permission to be human. Too many of us live under the illusion that we must be unshakable at all times. But being unshakable does not mean being unfeeling. The Stoics didn't deny grief. They wrote about it. They didn't deny fear. They prepared for it. They didn't deny frustration. They examined it until it lost its power. To know yourself is to know the full spectrum of your feelings, not just the ones that are comfortable. This honesty also strengthens your relationships. When you tell someone you trust, I feel hurt, instead of masking it with silence, you open the door to genuine connection. By communicating your feelings clearly, you prevent resentment from taking root. Resentment grows in the gap between what we feel and what we are willing to admit. By closing that gap, you stop small hurts from becoming permanent fractures. Of course, there is vulnerability in this. It is not always safe to be emotionally open with everyone. Some people may use your honesty against you. This is why it is vital to choose your audience wisely. You do not owe an explanation of your inner world to every person who asks how you are. But you do owe the truth to yourself, at least in private. You can write it in a journal, speak it to a therapist, or say it aloud when you are alone. The goal is not to perform your emotions for others, but to acknowledge them for yourself. Jung famously said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. Your emotions are not your identity, they are signals. Anger might be telling you that a boundary has been crossed. Anxiety might be warning you of an uncertainty you need to face. Sadness might be showing you where you have experienced a loss. Owning these signals means you can finally interpret them, act on them, and use them to guide you toward the person you want to be. And here lies the paradox. The more you own your emotions, the less power they have over you. The very act of saying, "Yes, I am upset," transforms the emotion from a shadowy, overwhelming force into something tangible and finite. It is like placing a wild animal in a safe enclosure, not to harm it, but to observe it, learn from it, and decide how to engage with it. Over time, you realize that emotions are not something to be feared. They are tools. The Stoics called this practice attentiveness, paying close attention to what is happening in your mind and body so that you can live deliberately. If you wish to live a deliberate life, you must begin with the truth. And the truth is, no one is fine all the time. Pretending you are is not strength, it's avoidance. True strength is the courage to see yourself clearly, without flinching, and still choose to act with virtue. 10. Learn your boiling point. Everyone has a threshold, an invisible line that, once crossed, transforms us from calm and composed to something far more volatile. For some, it is a slow burn, a steady accumulation of frustrations. For others, it's like flipping a switch. One moment, they are fine. The next, they are overcome. This limit, this boiling point, is not inherently flawed. It is part of the human condition. The danger arises when we fail to see it coming, when we only recognize it in the rearview mirror. After the words have been said, the damage has been done, the bridges have been burned. Your boiling point is not just a state of mind, it's a physical reality. Your body often knows you're approaching the edge long before your conscious mind does. Your shoulders creep toward your ears, your heartbeat quickens, your breath becomes shallow. Perhaps your jaw clenches, your stomach twists, or your hands form into fists. These are your body's early warning systems. If you ignore them, they will drag you into a reaction you will almost certainly regret. To notice these physical cues is to make the unconscious conscious. It is to catch yourself before you pass the point of no return. The Stoics practiced this kind of self-awareness daily. They didn't wait for their emotions to spiral. They monitored them like a watchman scanning the horizon for a storm. Seneca wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." In other words, the initial trigger may be small, but the destruction caused by your unchecked reaction can be monumental. This is what makes learning your boiling point so critical. It's not about suppressing your emotions, it's about intercepting them before they hijack your reason. From a psychological perspective, this interception is vital. Once you cross into a full emotional surge, particularly anger, your brain chemistry shifts dramatically. Your brain's ancient survival system, the amygdala, goes into overdrive while the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, reason, and impulse control, takes a back seat. This is why people say and do things in the heat of the moment that seem unbelievable to them later. Your logical brain didn't fail you because you are a bad person. It was temporarily sidelined because your body went into survival mode. The Stoics may not have used these scientific terms, but they understood the effect intimately. So, how do you learn to spot your boiling point before it boils over? Start by looking for patterns. Reflect on the times you lost your temper or were swept away by an emotional reaction. What happened just before? What were the physical sensations? Were there certain phrases, tones of voice, or situations that consistently acted as triggers? The more you identify these precursors, the better prepared you will be to handle them. This isn't about obsessing over every interaction. It's about knowing yourself well enough to recognize the signs. When you notice them, the tightening muscles, the shallow breathing, the racing thoughts, the wisest move you can make is to step away. This is not avoidance. It is strategy. Marcus Aurelius advised taking a view from above, imagining the situation from a vast, detached perspective. Stepping away is the physical embodiment of that practice. It creates the distance you need to see clearly again. Leave the room. Go for a walk. Splash cold water on your face. Breathe deeply and slowly. These small acts interrupt the emotional escalation, giving your rational mind a chance to come back online. It's crucial to remember that learning your boiling point isn't about becoming emotionally numb. The Stoics never aimed to erase emotion. They aimed to guide it. Emotions, including anger, are signals. Anger can reveal that a boundary has been violated. Frustration can highlight an injustice. The key is to receive the signal without letting it burn down the entire house. Your boiling point can become your teacher, showing you where your values lie, what you hold sacred, and what unresolved issues still demand your attention. A practical technique the Stoics would have appreciated is what modern psychology calls urge surfing. Instead of impulsively acting on the urge to lash out, you observe it, riding it like a wave. You notice its peak, its intensity, and then you feel it naturally recede, all without trying to force it away. It requires practice, but it is effective because most emotional surges are short-lived if you don't feed them with more reactive thoughts. And consider this: your boiling point is always lower when you are already stressed, tired, or overwhelmed. This is why managing your overall well-being is fundamental to emotional regulation. The Stoics spoke of living in harmony with nature, which includes respecting the limits of your own body and mind. If you are constantly running on empty, your emotional temperature is already high. It takes very little heat to push you to a boil. Prioritizing sleep, nutrition, and stress management isn't just about physical health. It's about giving yourself the emotional resilience to navigate life's challenges. But what happens when you miss the signs? Because no matter how self-aware you become, there will be times you find yourself already at the edge. This is where the Stoic principle of self-reflection becomes indispensable. Marcus Aurelius constantly reviewed his own behavior, not to shame himself, but to learn. If you do cross the line, own it. Apologize if necessary. Then ask yourself, what was the trigger? What signs did I miss? How can I catch them earlier next time? This transforms your mistakes into lessons. The most liberating aspect of learning your boiling point is that it puts you back in control. You are no longer walking into situations blind. You begin to recognize that critical moment, the tightening in your chest, the quickening of your thoughts, and instead of letting it consume you, you use it as a signal to choose a different path. That is not suppression. That is mastery. We cannot always avoid being provoked. People will be thoughtless. Life will be unfair. But we can choose how far we are willing to be pulled from our center. By learning your boiling point, you are installing an internal early warning system, one that says, "You are close. Pause here." And the more you heed its warning, the less damage you will have to repair later. The goal is not to never feel anger or frustration, but to catch yourself before those emotions start making decisions for you. That is the art of emotional control, not being untouched by life, but being unshaken by it. When you can do that, you are no longer at the mercy of your boiling point. You are the one who controls the flame. 11. Create your personal mantra. There are moments when your emotions feel like a rising tide, threatening to sweep you away. A conversation takes a sharp turn, an email strikes a nerve, or life delivers an unexpected blow, and suddenly your mind is no longer a calm harbor. It is a storm of racing thoughts and reactive impulses. In these moments, it is easy to forget who you want to be, and instead become who the situation provokes you to be. This is why you need an anchor, something to hold on to when the waves begin to crash. The Stoics had their daily reminders, principles they would repeat to themselves, not because the ideas were new, but because they knew that in the heat of a crisis, memory fades and raw emotion takes command. A personal mantra serves the same purpose. It is more than just words. It is a compass that points you back to your true north when the world is trying to spin you around. A personal mantra should be short, simple, and easy to recall even when your mind is scattered. It is a phrase you can repeat silently, a mental shield you can raise in an instant. The power of a mantra lies in its ability to bypass overthinking. When you are in a charged moment, your brain is not looking for a complex philosophical debate. It needs a quick, decisive intervention. A mantra acts as an emotional circuit breaker, interrupting the feedback loop of reactivity before it can take hold. It is a declaration of intent, a quiet whisper that reminds you of your deeper values, allowing you to choose your response rather than being swept away by your reaction. In that razor-thin moment, between the spark of provocation and the wildfire of a reaction you'll later regret, a mantra can intervene. It slips into the silence not as a command, but as a reminder. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. A mantra is that choice in action. It is you, deciding in real time to be the person you have committed to becoming, not the person your anger, fear, or anxiety would forge in the heat of the moment. The Stoics were masters of such mental devices. They would rehearse phrases each morning, preparing their minds for the day's challenges. Seneca wrote, "All cruelty springs from weakness." A line like that could serve as an anchor for someone who wants to remain compassionate, even when provoked. Or consider Epictetus's reminder, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The key is to find words that resonate with your deepest values. Because when emotions run high, we do not rise to the occasion. We fall to the level of our preparation. A mantra is that preparation. It must be personal, not something pulled from a list of inspirational quotes because it sounds pleasant, but something that feels like your own truth. When you say it, you should feel it in your bones. It might be as simple as, "I choose peace." It might be a firm declaration, "I don't break my own rules." Or a quiet affirmation, "I am the calm in the storm." Whatever it is, it should feel as though you are speaking directly to your own soul, not to impress others, not to fit a trend, but to hold yourself to the standard you've set for your life. Once you have found it, you practice it, not just in moments of crisis, but every day, until it becomes second nature. The Stoics called this premeditatio, or mental rehearsal. Your mantra is a cornerstone of this daily training. Say it in the morning as you wake, in the middle of the day as you pause for breath, and at night as you reflect. The more you repeat it in moments of calm, the more readily it will come to you in moments of chaos. From a psychological perspective, mantras work by engaging your focus and interrupting negative thought spirals. They give your brain a clear, simple task. Repeat the words. Hold the meaning. This prevents you from ruminating on what has gone wrong and instead directs your attention toward what you can control: your mindset, your actions, your principles. In cognitive behavioral therapy, this is known as thought replacement, consciously swapping an unhelpful thought with one that aligns with your goals. A mantra is this technique in its purest form. It is not about denying reality. If you are stressed, angry, or anxious, you are not pretending those emotions don't exist. The Stoics never ran from their feelings. They acknowledged them, examined them, and then decided what to do next. Your mantra doesn't erase what's happening. It reminds you that you can face it without losing yourself. Let's make this practical. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone's challenge feels deeply personal. Your instinct is to defend yourself sharply, but instead, as you feel your jaw tense and your pulse quicken, you silently repeat your mantra. I control my response. You take a breath. You speak clearly, without venom. The tension doesn't vanish instantly, but you walk away knowing you stayed true to your standard. That is the quiet power of a mantra. It doesn't change the other person. It changes how you carry yourself through the moment. Carl Jung believed that our growth comes from integrating the parts of ourselves we'd rather not see. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he said, but by making the darkness conscious. Your mantra helps you do that. It's not just for when you are calm and collected. It is for the moments when your shadow side begins to take the lead. When irritation, insecurity, or pride tries to hijack your response, the mantra steps in as a reminder. This is the real me. This is the line I do not cross. The more you live by it, the more your mantra becomes woven into your identity. At first, you will need to consciously remember to use it, but over time, it will become automatic. You'll catch yourself about to react in a way that doesn't serve you, and the phrase will surface without effort. This is what the Stoics meant by philosophy as a way of life. It's not about theory. It's about what you do when it matters most. And your mantra need not always be solemn. It can be light, even playful, as long as it works for you. The point isn't to sound wise, it's to guide your behavior. Some people even have different mantras for different situations, one for patience, one for courage, one for self-compassion. The crucial part is that each one feels authentic and actionable. You may also find that your mantra evolves. As you grow, your priorities shift. The words that once motivated you might not hold the same power. This is natural. The Stoics constantly revised their reflections because life is never static. Keep your mantra relevant to the person you are becoming. As Aristotle said, the energy of the mind is the essence of life. Repeating your mantra focuses that energy, directing it toward the person you want to be. And in a world filled with distractions and provocations, having that anchor can mean the difference between living reactively and living deliberately. So take the time to create your own. Make it short. Make it yours. Make it a promise you refuse to break, and practice it until it's a part of you. Because when the emotional storms come, and they will, those few words might be the one thing that keeps you standing firm, facing the wind, and walking away with your integrity intact. That is the strength the Stoics understood, and the strength you can build one repetition at a time. And just as you anchor the mind with a chosen phrase, you must also anchor the body. This brings us to the most fundamental practice of all, to breathe as if you mean it. Isn't it a strange paradox that in moments of overwhelming stress, the very rhythm that sustains our life, the breath, is the first thing we forget to command? We have been breathing since the moment we were born, and yet when emotions spiral, our breath becomes shallow, fast, and erratic, as if our body has switched into survival mode without our permission. We don't notice it happening. We just feel the tension in our shoulders, the tightness in our chest, the frantic race of our thoughts. But the truth is, your breath is far more than an automatic function. It is the control panel for your inner state. The Stoics didn't have the language of modern neuroscience, but they understood this principle intimately. When life confronts you with something that stirs fear, anger, or anxiety, your body prepares for battle. Your sympathetic nervous system, the engine of fight or flight, kicks in. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and your breathing quickens to flood your body with oxygen. This is a magnificent tool if you're running from a predator. But most of the time, the danger is an email, a difficult conversation, or an unexpected piece of news. Our body is reacting as if it's life or death, even when it isn't. As Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Becoming aware of your breath in these moments is how you make the unconscious conscious. It's the quiet realization: I am safe right now, and I can tell my body to stand down. Deep, intentional breathing sends a signal directly to your brain. We're okay. We don't need to fight. We can think clearly. A deep inhale provides the energy to remain present without tipping into panic. A long, slow exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's own braking system, which calms you down, lowers your heart rate, and restores balance. The Stoics framed this as maintaining equanimity in the face of chaos, but the effect is the same. By controlling your breath, you control the gateway between chaos and calm. Think about the last time you were caught off guard by something stressful. Chances are, your breath changed before you even realized it, becoming shorter, quicker, higher in your chest. That is your cue. The moment you notice it, you can interrupt the spiral. One slow inhale, a brief hold, one long, slow exhale. It sounds too simple to work, but simplicity is often where true power lies. The Stoics thrived on practices that were straightforward yet transformative, knowing that the more complicated a tool, the harder it is to use under pressure. Shallow, rapid breathing feeds the anxious imagination. It tells your mind that something is terribly wrong, even when you are not in active danger. But slow, steady breathing tethers you to reality. It draws your awareness back to this precise moment, preventing your mind from spinning into a vortex of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. That is the beauty of the breath. It is always happening, right here, right now. It is the most accessible anchor you will ever have. Deliberate breathing has measurable effects. Studies show it can reduce cortisol levels, improve focus, and lower blood pressure. But its value lies beyond the biological. It creates a shift in perspective. When you slow your breath, you are telling yourself, I am not helpless. I have tools. I can choose how to meet this moment. To make conscious breathing a habit is to make emotional control second nature. The Stoics spoke endlessly of preparation. Marcus Aurelius would begin his day by reminding himself that he would encounter rudeness and misunderstanding, but that these things need not disturb his mind. You can do the same with your breath. Practice when you are calm, so the skill is there when you are not. Take a few minutes each morning to sit quietly, breathing in for a count of 4, holding for 4, and exhaling for a count of 6. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel your jaw unclench. This is not wasted time. It is training. And the real test will come. You will find yourself in traffic, feeling the heat rise in your face. You will get that message that makes your chest tighten. In those moments, it's easy to be pulled into the current of reaction. But this is where breathing with intention changes everything. To pause and breathe is to choose not to become the worst version of yourself. It is buying yourself a few precious seconds to remember your values, your goals, and your composure. This is why breathing is more than a relaxation technique. It is a form of self-mastery. The Stoic aim was to remain steady, regardless of external events. Breath is the bridge between the body's instinct to react and the mind's ability to respond. By focusing on it, you aren't suppressing your emotions. You are creating enough space to decide how you want to engage with them. It's worth noting that not all breathing is equal. When stressed, you might think you're taking deep breaths while only expanding your chest. True, calming breaths come from the diaphragm. Place a hand on your stomach. As you inhale, it should rise more than your chest. This sends the strongest signal to your nervous system that it is time to calm down. The long exhale is especially important. It is the very mechanism that puts the brakes on your body's stress response. There is also something profoundly grounding about making your breath the sole point of focus. As you count the length of each inhale and exhale, you pull your mind away from the source of stress and into something simple, constant, and real. This mirrors the Stoic practice of focusing only on what is within your control. You cannot control the traffic, the email, or another person's tone. But you can, in this moment, control your breath. And that is enough to begin shifting everything. Over time, breathing like you mean it changes the way you move through the world. You become less reactive, not because life gets easier, but because you've built the habit of creating space between stimulus and response. You stop getting swept away by every emotional wave because you've learned how to steady the boat. And this isn't just for managing negative emotions. Intentional breathing deepens positive ones too. Taking a few slow breaths during a joyful or peaceful moment helps you fully absorb it, anchoring it in your memory. The Stoics believed in living in harmony with nature, and what is more natural than the breath? It is the rhythm of life itself. Jung once remarked that, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Breathing is one of the simplest ways to look inside, to awaken to what is happening in your mind and body before it spills out into your words and actions. The next time you feel your emotions start to spiral, do not underestimate the simplest tool you possess. One slow inhale, one long exhale. Repeat. This is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is reclaiming control in the most immediate, tangible way possible. Because when you breathe like you mean it, you are not just calming your body. You are telling your mind, "I am here. I am steady. I choose how I meet this moment." And in that choice, true strength resides. In the end, your breath, your mind, and your choices are yours alone. No storm, no chaos, no person can take them from you unless you hand them over. Guard them well. Let every inhale remind you of your strength, and every exhale release what you cannot control. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. If you're ready to take this journey even deeper, you can continue exploring with one of the suggested videos on your screen now. Your next step toward calm, clarity, and self-mastery is just one click away.